Today on the channel, I am experimenting with a whole lot of new materials on a cradled panel that I will use for a future cold wax painting. So stick around, it's going to be a lot of fun. Welcome back. If you've not been here before, welcome to my channel. This is a place for lots and lots of art experimentation and instruction and tutorials and process videos. So if you have an interest in art, consider subscribing to the channel. Hit that bell notification so that you will know whenever I upload new videos. And if at the end you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Let's get started. So I have been doing a lot of cold wax painting lately, and one of my favorite things to do is build in some texture on my substrate before I go to the cold wax and oils. So I thought today I would experiment with a few new materials that I have and some old materials that I've not used before for cold wax painting. And I thought I would just bring you along for fun, and we'll see where it goes, because you know me, everything's an experiment, right? So I just pulled together some things that I want to try out. I just have some regular old cheap masking tape. I have a foamy stamp. It's the kind of hard foam. It's at artfoamies.com. They have lots of really cool foam stamps you can use for, acrylics or jelly plate or, whatever you're doing, card making, whatever. I found this on Amazon, and it is a fondant mold. It had a high rubber lip all the way around. This inside part right here was higher, and I took scissors and cut it down because what I want to do is try to see if I can get an impression of these roses by pressing it into a layer of cold wax. And I didn't want the line around the edges, so hopefully I took enough off that that won't be an issue, but we'll see. But it's a real flexible silicone mold, quite thick for fondant, but I'm not a baker, so I found a new use for it. This is, it's metal. It has a handle. I suppose you could take the handle and screws. You could take it off. But I like the shape of it. I like the size of it. Found it on Amazon, and it's for, again, baking. Some kind of, it's not a pitzelle. It's like a Mexican version of a pitzelle, I think. I forget what the term is, what the name of it is. Somebody will tell you in the comments maybe. Anyways, another impression kind of tool to try. And I found these really cool papers. They come on a big roll, but it's actual fiber coiled and pressed into this handmade paper, which ends up with this really cool edge when you tear it. And then on this one especially, it has really heavy pieces of fiber through it, so I was able to tear it until I got to a fiber, and then I had to snip it. But some of them are kind of loose on the top. I could pull some of them off, I think. But I thought, again, those would be fun to just try to press into the wet wax. I'm using a cradled panel. This is just a cheap one from Michael's. I think they come like 3 in a pack. This is I think a 9 by 12, 11 by 14, I think. And then I pulled out my Distress Texture Paste. This is a crackle one. And then my Super Heavy Matte Gel. So I'm going to start, as always, with just getting a couple coats of gesso on my board just to seal it and prepare the surface. So once that's done and dry, I'll be back and we'll start to play. Okay, this is 80% dry. I put one layer of gesso down, and then I put sand in the gesso and brushed the sand around in the gesso as I spread it across. This is just It's just like a clean sand. I got it on Amazon. It was really cheap. Just kind of a tan color, fairly fine. That does a really good job of adding texture on my initial layer. And I used just this cheap brush. I don't know, it's probably 1.5 inches. Yeah, 1.5 inch bristle brush, old, to put the gesso and sand on. And then as I was doing it, I mushed into the gesso with my brush to get some brush texture as well. I waited for that to dry, and then I just put another coat of just gesso on top. It kind of fills in the texture a little bit so that it's not quite so high to start with. I use just this Liquitex Basics gesso for this. The other thing that I pulled out, this is just some homemade texture paste that I made with like spackle and acrylic paint and PVA glue. I made it a very long time ago, put it in this old, I think it was a lunch meat container, and then kept it sealed in a plastic bag. And it's I'm going to guess at least 1.5 years old, and it's still, you can see it's still good. So I may put some of that on here. I'll lift this up so you can see the texture. I think you can see it. I'm going to go with a palette knife. I need a fairly big one. I'm just going to use this spatula type, and I'm going into this homemade stuff. And I'm just going to kind of do it in sort of an impasto style. Now this is going to take me a few hours because these layers that I'm putting on now are going to have to dry. Let's try this super matte, super heavy gel. Let's try with this. I have this silicone brush. Now this isn't going to be archival, just so you know. If you're worried about it, don't use this kind of tape. There are archival tapes that you can't get it started, that you can get if you like the look of the tape. I'm just going to pull some little pieces off here, and I'm not sure how well it'll stick in that sand, but I'm just going to kind of like fold it back on itself a little bit just to create some texture, almost like making a ruffle, I guess. I don't sew either, so I'm not sure that's a good analogy, but I have tried. Sewing machines really, really hate me. Hopefully that'll stay down if you use it. Put some heavy matte gel underneath it. That way, if it's something that ends up that you do like and you want to keep, it's not going to fall off at some point. And was that all I had for texture? Seems like there was something else I was going to use. I did drag this out. This is some of that plaster infused, impregnated cloth, but I'm just going to cut a few just random shapes of this and layer them up. And I know this makes good texture under acrylic paintings. I've never tried it with a cold wax painting. Here I'm just dipping this in the water and get it wet, and it kind of dissolves that plaster. And then when you rub it, get a little more water right there. The plaster kind of fills the holes in. I'm going to kind of scrunch it up a little bit, and so it's not completely flat. You can also get a lot of cool like strings coming off of it if you want to pull some off like that. Stick those in there. I am going to do a little cleanup, and we'll have to wait for these things to dry. So when this is all dry, I'll be back. I lied, I'm back. I knew there was something else I was looking for. The texture paste, the crackle, I wanted to try. Okay, when this is dry, I have to remember to put a layer of clear gesso over it so that when I put my paint on, everything has equal absorption, because right now this gesso is going to absorb the paint differently than maybe the crackle does, or definitely different than the gel does. Okay, it's been a few hours. I had the fan on this and it is dry. I'm going to lift it up so you can see. This is that plaster cloth stuff. Here's the crackle medium. The tape, didn't really have to do anything with that. This is my homemade texture paste, and this is the gel medium. This in here is just the gesso with sand in it. I gave this all a coat of clear gesso. This is the Liquitex Professional Clear Gesso, and that is dry. So I'm going to, let me move this aside for a minute. I'm going to mix up some cold wax and oil paints, but I just wanted to tell you what I'm going to mix. So I am going to get stuff mixed up. I may put a coat of acrylic paint on this board first too. I think I will do that just to get an underlying color, so that when I move the paint or scrape back through the paint, I'm not going to go just to stark white. I'll be going to an underlying color. So I'm going to get that stuff mixed up. I decided to use a high flow acrylic. This is a golden high flow in transparent yellow iron oxide. I watered it down quite a bit, and you can see the different textures, how they took the paint differently. This one is probably the most smooth in terms of the application of the paint. It went on much more transparent over the gel medium. Really uneven on that plaster cloth, which I love that. The crackle's really nice. I have mixed up my 4 oil colors with cold wax. I'm using the Gamblin cold wax medium. And that's my starting palette. Now I will mix each of these colors with a little bit of white, and then I may mix these two together and these two together to get a cohesive palette of colors to start with. So I'm gonna just do that. Here, I can move this and you can see what I'm talking about. I'm just going to start with, let's start with the phthalo blue. I'm just going to pick up, you see that? Pick up a little bit on my bowl scraper. And let's go over here. That's a lot of texture. Work it down into that crackle. With this much texture, it's probably going to take a couple layers before I can try any of those impression tools. I don't think anything's going to make an impression in this. I really have a lot of texture buildup here. At this point, I'm just getting color down, really. Come in with the darker blue up here. I just love the what ifs in art. You know, what if I try this with that, or what if I do this? I wonder what will happen. Those are my favorite moments. I can just take the edge of my bowl scraper and make marks. And you see, that's why I didn't want to just leave it white, because otherwise those marks would just be coming through white and would be far less interesting. When things start to look like they're getting muddy, that's just a reminder to clean off your tool, whatever you're using. And I don't mind some of that yellow poking through. Now just keep in mind too, any water-based materials that you want to use, like we did on the underlayers of this, have to go before you start with any cold wax and oil. Once you start with cold wax and oil, you're done. No more water-based media can go on there. If you don't have a bowl scraper, but maybe you have a catalyst wedge, that works just as well. Or you can just apply it with a palette knife, which I will probably switch to at some point. I go back and forth between a palette knife. For these initial layers, I usually just use the bowl scraper. I'm going to go with the palette knife a little bit. Just loading up just a little bits on the back of my knife and just scraping over the surface, not pressing down very hard at all. Just catching the tops of the texture. I'm just going to drag through this to soften it back a little bit. This is one of my favorite stages. They're just, you can't make a mistake. You know, you're just playing, throwing some paint at it, seeing how it intermixes, if you can lighten it, if you can darken it, what you like, what you don't like. You can scrape through, scrape back. At this stage, like, you can't get attached to anything, because I really liked that before I put the blue in there. But you know, now it's in there, so another layer on top of this may make it look totally different, and I'll like it better again. You just, I mean, unless you're going for a painting that you're going to do just with one layer, which is rare, you just have to let go sometimes and know that those spots where you go, ooh, I really like that, probably aren't going to stay there. I'm not going to get to the impression experiment until I get another layer on here. There's just not enough wax for that to really do anything. I mean, I can try, but I don't think we're going to get anything just because there's not enough of a layer. We'll take this and see if we get anything. I need a brayer. Pushing pretty hard because I know there's not much there to go through. Yeah, that's pretty though, huh? Now I might be able to take that wax that's on this paper and transfer it over here though. A little bit. Got a little bit of an impression right there. Just not enough there to make an impression in. And while I'm wiping at this, I will clean it off better later. I will tell you, I clean 90% of the tools that I use with baby oil. I tried for you. I didn't figure we'd get much because we need a thicker layer, which I really can't get right now. I mean, maybe just for experimental sake. I'm trying here, you guys. Let's see. Let's go back to this, because that kind of sort of worked to begin with. I keep banging into my head into the camera. Love this paper. Let's see. Well, that worked. Worked pretty good. Let's try and put some of it down here, this lighter spot. Yeah, well, that makes me happy because this wasn't cheap. This paper was not cheap, but I knew that it would make cool marks. This would work with wet acrylics. Yeah, just not enough up there, but yeah, that worked there. That's very cool. I really like it. So I'm going to have to leave this here and build up a few more layers on top of this texture, and then I'll come back and we'll try all these new texture tools. I started with too much sand in that gesso and it's just really sucking all the paint in. But the crackles turned out pretty cool. They'll look good with a lighter color on top, I think, to accentuate the crackles once this layer is dry. I really liked the gel medium over here. I like that a lot. The other thing that you can use if you don't want that much texture is calcium carbonate. Mix that into your gesso prep layer. Some people call it marble dust. That's just the artsy fancy word for it. It's just calcium carbonate is the same thing. If you search for marble dust, you're going to pay 3 times more for something labeled marble dust as a great big bag of calcium carbonate on Amazon. Just saying, it's the exact same thing. You know how it is. People want your money. Okay, I'm going to leave this alone, and I won't come back until I get a smoother, more built-up surface so that I can really show you. I'm anxious to try this one and the roses, and we'll do the paper some more and the foamy art stamp. Come back and I'll see you on the flip side. Okay, I'm back to tell you what I learned, what worked and what didn't. Starting, I'm sort of centered on this canvas right here. This right here did work. It was where there wasn't a whole lot of texture other than just the background of the gesso and sand texture. But this paper, if you remember what it looked like before it was full of paint, this paper worked really well in this area right here. And then I'm going to move my camera over here. The art foamy, this one, worked really well up in this area. And then I thought, well, what about rubber stamps if the art foamy stamp worked? So I grabbed some, it's a Tim Holtz set. I'll put link in the description which set it is. But I have this, I'm really zoomed in, this little circle, you can tell by my thumbnail, it's not real big, maybe an inch. Where are we at? Over here. That worked well to incise in there. This one actually went all the way back to that initial yellow acrylic layer. And then if you see right in here, in that same stamp set was this one. And then let's see, down at the bottom, so I remove my camera, sorry, don't make you dizzy. This little scribbly mark right here was this stamp, also from that same stamp set. This one that I was hoping and praying would work, I think if I didn't have so much texture and I had a partially dry layer, it would have worked better. And I did get a partial right there, and I really like it, so I'm looking forward to working with that one some more. I ended up putting on like 3 more layers of wax. So I put a real light layer on. You can see some of the white poking through up there. I added a lot of white because it was pretty dark. And then I went dark again with blues and purples. And then after that dried, I went to this orange and red layer, more of warm colors. So that's how many layers it took. Like I said before, totally my fault that I built up so much texture that then the reductive or subtractive methods of all these stamps and things didn't work. This really didn't work at all. But I've seen Marina Heading Van Berkholt. She does awesome cold wax work, and I've seen her use something similar, and it works really well. So again, I'm just chalking it up to too much sand in that gesso to be able to really get down into the wax. I'm going to let this set up a little bit. It's super wet. I just finished it. But I'll let it set up a little bit, and then I might go back into it again in some places and see if some of these things work better on a partially dry layer as opposed to the super wet. So anyway, that's what I learned. I hope you learned some things too. What to do, what not to do. It's always good to know what not to do, right? I mean, that's also part of experimentation is, well, that didn't work, so don't do it again, right? So anyways, thanks a lot for coming along and sticking it out with me through my trial and errors. And I appreciate you a lot. I'll be back with more cold wax and oil experiments. So come back, okay? I appreciate you. See you next time. Bye.